examined this chapel years ago. Helena leaned in, her voice a conspiratorial whisper that smelled of old parchment and mint. The Lord works in mysterious ways. Sister? Did I miss something then? Perhaps. Or perhaps it wasn't time for it to be found. But now, with the wolves at the gate, we shall speak further at dinner. There is a weight in this stone. Boniface. A weight that needs to be lifted. But dinner would never come for Sister Helena. The evening was a blur of activity. The town was buzzing with the news of the sale. At the local pub, the Stag and Hound, the talk was divided. Some welcomed the new jobs, the development promised, while others felt the soul of Great Slaughter was being sold for 30 pieces of silver. In the dark room of the convent, Peggy, the young civilian assistant at the police station, was helping Sister Boniface develop some archival photos. Peggy looked up, her hands stained with developer fluid. "I'm going to miss this, Sister," Peggy said. "The cases, the mysteries, the way you always see the truth when everyone else is just looking at the clutter." "The truth is always there," Peggy Boniface replied, watching a photo of the 1920s choir slowly materialize in the chemical bath. "It's just that people are very good at standing in front of it. They use their egos as a screen." A frantic knocking interrupted them. It was Sister Peter, her face pale, her breath coming in short, jagged gasps. "Boniface, come quickly, it's Helena, in the chapel." They ran. The corridors felt longer than usual, the shadows of the vaulted ceilings stretching out like reaching fingers. The air in the chapel was cold, smelling of extinguished beeswax and ancient dust. There, at the foot of the altar, lay Sister Helena. Her staff was broken beside her. Her eyes, which had seen the wonders of the ancient world, were fixed on the vaulted ceiling, sightless. Inspector Gillespie arrived minutes later. He knelt beside the body, his professional detachment struggling against the personal grief of seeing a member of the St. Vincent family fallen. He reached out, his fingers hovering over Helena's pulse point, though he already knew. "Blunt force trauma to the back of the head," Sam muttered, his voice thick. She never saw it coming, ambushed in the house of the Lord. Boniface knelt on the other side. She didn't look at the wound yet. She looked at the habit. Her eyes scanned the dark wool with microscopic precision. "Inspector, look at these flecks, an ivory-colored lipophilic compound." "Wax?" Sam asked. "Not just any wax," Boniface said, her voice trembling slightly. "From its hue and pigmentation, it is the sort utilized in a traditional Catholic pillar candle, a heavy, expensive kind. I believe we have a killer candlestick, Sam, a sanctified weapon. An opportunistic murder," Felix nodded, looking around the darkened chapel. "Someone grabbed what was at hand. They didn't come here to kill, but they found they had to." "But why?" Sam asked. "What could an old nun have that was worth killing for?" "She knew something," Boniface said, reaching into Helena's stiffening hand. She pulled out a crumpled scrap of paper that the old nun had gripped in her final moments. She gave this to a passing postman just before she entered the chapel. "It says, in Latin," Sam said. "In the chapel, in plain sight," Boniface translated, her mind already racing through the architecture of the building. Chapter 3. The Ghost of the Earl. The investigation turned the convent into a crime scene, a cruel irony for a place that was supposed to be a sanctuary. Sam Gillespie sat in the small office he had set up in the vestry, looking through the list of people who had been in the building during the blackout period. Lord Matthew, Ronnie Panasser, Lynn Goodwin, and our own sisters, Sam listed, and Ruth Penny. She was everywhere yesterday. She has a way of being in rooms she shouldn't be in. "Ruth wouldn't kill a nun for a story," Sam Boniface said, entering with a tray of tea and biscuits. "Wouldn't she? She's ambitious." Boniface. "And this development of the century story is her ticket back to the big leagues. She's tired of being the local girl, done good. She wants to be the woman who broke the biggest land scandal in the country." Boniface set the tea down, her gaze searching Sam's face. "Is it her ambition you're worried about, Inspector, or the fact that she's back?" Sam looked away, focusing on his notes. "We need to look at the why before the who. Helena was an archaeologist. She was looking for something, and she found it behind that plaque." They returned to the chapel. The bronze plaque for the late Earl was loose ever so slightly. Boniface used a small screwdriver to pry it away. Behind it was a cavity in the stone, and inside that, a glass jar with a broken wax seal. "Empty," Sam noted, his frustration mounting. "But not long ago," Boniface added, touching the rim, The dust hasn't settled in the indentation. Something was taken from this jar tonight. Something Helena found. The investigation led them to Lord Matthew. They found him in the manor library, a room that felt like it was slowly being reclaimed by the earth. Stacks of unpaid bills and legal notices covered the grand desk. My father was a man of faith, Matthew said, his voice cracking as he held a glass of whiskey. But he was also a man of secrets. He told me he'd made provisions for the sisters. But I found nothing. Only debt. I'm drowning. Inspector, if this sale doesn't go through, the Sedgwick name ends in a bankruptcy court. I'll be the Earl who sold the family silverware just to keep the roof from falling in. Did Sister Helena know about these provisions? She claims she did, Matthew admitted. His eyes She confronted me yesterday. She said my father's heart was in this stone, and that I was betraying his soul. We argued. I was angry. I was desperate. But I didn't kill her. I couldn't. Meanwhile, Ruth Penny was conducting her own investigation. She had dug into the local archives and found a connection that chilled her. She found Sam in the courtyard, the moon lighting the tension in her face. Sam, look at this, Ruth said, holding up an old-school photograph. Sister Helena didn't just live here. She used to teach at St. Peter's, and look who a star pupil was. Sam looked at the photo. A young, scowling girl stood next to a younger, sterner sister, Helena. It was Lynn Goodwin. Lynn said, Helena made her life a living hell, Ruth whispered. She hated her. She told me once she'd hated nuns, ever since. She said Helena was judgmental and cruel. What if Helena found out something about Lynn's past, something that could ruin her career? The pieces were moving, but they didn't yet form a picture. There was the waxy indentation found on the candlestick pattern that looked like a signet ring or a crest. There was a missing document from the glass jar. And there was the impending contract exchange, a countdown to the destruction of St. Vincent. Chapter 4. The Final Pageant. The day of the quincentennial arrived with a mock-sabrutary sun. The town gathered in the convent gardens, the air filled with the scent of mown grass and expectation. The sisters, led by Reverend Mother Adrian, stood in their finest habits, their faces masks of serene courage. To the crowd, they looked like statues of Indra. The pageant began. Sister Peter declaimed the history of the land, her voice ringing out over the crowd like a clarion call. 500 years, through war and plague, through kings and commoners, the land passed from father to son. The key to each and every one. But the key is not just of iron and brass, it is a key of service. As the play reached its climax, a symbolic handing of the key to the town, Sister Boniface wasn't watching the stage. She was watching the hands of the guests. She was looking for the mark of a killer. She saw the glint of gold on Lord Matthew's hand. She saw the nervous twitch of Lynn Goodwin's fingers. And then she saw it. In the model of the developmenta, Lord Adam Sedgwick Towers, there was a small decorative crest made of heavy brass. It was used to weight the base of the model. Boniface's eyes widened. She remembered the indentation in the wax on the candlestick. The model, Boniface whispered to Sam, who was standing beside her. The killer didn't wear a ring. They used the model itself as a grip. They gripped the heavy brass corner of the model's base to swing the candlestick with enough force to kill. The pattern meshed perfectly. But there was more. The Latin clue, in Socello Inc. Boniface looked toward the woods, her mind clicking into place. The old chapel, Boniface realized. The one in the woods that was deconsecrated a century ago. It's still on the grounds, but it's in plain sight of the main road, without being noticed. She slipped away from the crowd, her habit fluttering as she ran toward the ruins on the edge of the estate. Inside the crumbling stone walls, hidden behind a loose brick in the altar of the forgotten chapel, she found it, a leather-bound cylinder. Inside was a deed of gift, signed by the late Earl, witnessed and notarized by a firm that had long since closed. It bequeathed the entire convent and the surrounding lands not to his son, but to the Catholic diocese in perpetuity. The sale was illegal. The land wasn't Matthew's to sell. The Earl had known his son was a gambler and a spendthrift. He had protected the sisters from the grave. She ran back to the gardens, just as the speeches were beginning. Lord Matthew was at the podium, his hand trembling as he reached for the fountain pen to sign the final contract with Ronnie Penn. Stop! Boniface's voice cut through the air like a bell. The crowd gasped. Sam and Felix moved forward as Boniface held up the deed. Lord Matthew, she said, her voice filled with a profound, bone-deep sadness. Your father didn't leave you with debt because he was a bad businessman. He left you with debt because he had already given his greatest asset back to God. You knew that, didn't you? You found his letters. You tried to hide the truth. Matthew's face collapsed. The mask of the Earl shattered.